Kenya does not need aid. Kenya needs its wealth back. A statement by the Kenya Red Alliance, KEREAL, on the withdrawal of aid funding by the United States of America. The withdrawal of U.S. aid from Kenya has been framed by the political class, non-governmental organizations, and donor-dependent technocrats as a national catastrophe. We reject this framing in its entirety. What is being mourned is not the welfare of the Kenyan people, but the disruption of a neo-colonial system that has for decades replaced sovereignty with charity, development with dependency, and self-determination with permanent external supervision. Kenya is not a poor country. Kenya is a wealthy country that has been deliberately kept weak. The aid industry has long functioned as a political anesthetic, masking structural theft while disciplining the country into submission. Its withdrawal, painful as it is in the short term, exposes the truth that imperialist capital, not lack of resources, is the root cause of Kenya's crisis. This moment must not be wasted on lamentation. It must be seized as a moment of political clarity and revolutionary reorganization. Kenya possesses immense material wealth, vast mineral deposits, fertile land, strategic ports, a young and skilled population, and a financial sector large enough to fund industrial transformation. Yet the Kenyan state perpetually claims it cannot afford hospitals, medical personnel, education, or industrial infrastructure. This contradiction is not accidental, it is engineered. The wealth of Kenya is systematically siphoned out of the country through three interlinked mechanisms: foreign ownership, illicit financial flows, and IMF World Bank debt regimes. Major mineral deposits, banks, insurance companies, hotels, agribusiness firms, and key sectors of transport and energy are controlled by foreign capital. Profits generated in Kenya are repatriated to London, New York, Johannesburg, and offshore tax havens, while Kenyans are told to tighten their belts and wait for donors. What aid does is not to solve this theft, but to manage its consequences. Under IMF and World Bank poverty loans, Kenya was forced to privatize public institutions, slash social spending, liberalize markets, and surrender economic planning. Hospitals were starved of funding, medical personnel were casualized or frozen out of public employment. Public health infrastructure was deliberately weakened. Into this vacuum stepped NGOs and donor-funded projects, offering stopgap services that never built sovereign capacity. Health workers were forced to rely on foreign aid for salaries, not because Kenya lacked money, but because the state was prohibited from using it. This is the true function of aid, to fill holes created by imperialist policy while preserving the system that creates those holes. When aid is withdrawn, the contradiction becomes visible. Suddenly, thousands of health workers face unemployment. Clinics face collapse. The political class panics, not because it cannot act, but because it has been structured not to. This crisis reveals a brutal truth. Aid dependency is not a humanitarian arrangement. It is a political technology of control. We must be clear. The withdrawal of aid is not progressive in itself. It is not motivated by concern for Kenyan sovereignty. It is an imperial recalibration, but its effects can be politically transformative if seized by an organized conscious movement. Kenya does not need aid to feed itself. Kenya produces enough food to ensure food security if land were organized for social need rather than export profits and speculative hoarding. Kenya does not need aid to employ its people. Permanent jobs can be created through nationalized industries, agro-processing, public housing, transport manufacturing, and energy infrastructure. Kenya does not need aid to finance healthcare and education. The resources already extracted from this country every year exceed the total value of foreign aid many times over. What Kenya lacks is not resources, it lacks control. Imperialist agencies continue to back corrupt election riggers and comprador elites precisely because they guarantee this lack of control. Regimes like that of William Ruto are not accidents, they are instruments. They plunder public resources, privatize national wealth, repress dissent, and enforce IMF austerity with police batons. They ensure Kenya remains unable to build independent industry, forcing reliance on donors and NGOs to survive. When hospitals are not built, medical professionals are pushed into NGO employment. When public wages are frozen, workers are told to be grateful for donor stipends. When aid is cut, workers are abandoned. This cycle is not a failure of policy, it is the policy. The departure of aid agencies, therefore, must be understood not as a collapse, but as a confrontation. It strips away the illusion that Kenya's survival depends on external benevolence. It exposes the urgency of political organization to reclaim what already belongs to the people. A revolutionary alternative exists. Through nationalization of mineral resources, banking, insurance, energy, and strategic industries, Kenya can finance universal healthcare, free education, industrialization, and permanent employment. Through transparent public ownership and democratic accountability, corruption can be structurally dismantled rather than selectively prosecuted. Through cancellation of odious IMF World Bank debt, billions currently drained into interest payments can be redirected to social needs. Through planned industrial development, Kenya can move from export dependency to value addition and regional self-reliance. Aid agencies were never meant to stay forever. Their permanence is itself proof of failure. Their exit, while destabilizing, creates the political space to ask the only question that matters. Who owns Kenya's wealth, and in whose interests is it used? The Kenya Red Alliance does not celebrate suffering. We do not dismiss the real pain faced by workers, patients, and communities affected by aid withdrawal. But we reject the lie that returning to dependency is the solution. The answer is not to beg imperialist powers to resume control, but to organize the working class, the youth, health workers, and the poor into a force capable of seizing political and economic power. This moment demands courage, not nostalgia. Aid was never liberation. Sovereignty will not come from NGOs, donors, or imperial capitals. It will come from organized struggle, nationalization, and the abolition of capitalism as a system that exists only to extract, impoverish, and dominate. The withdrawal of aid is a shock. Let it also be a wake-up call. Kenya does not need aid. Kenya needs its country back. This is the view from the Central Committee of the Kenya Red Alliance. Thanks for watching.